Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project. Link to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request.
So if you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, there's a certain group of characters, sort of a bunch of silly little guys that are getting their own series of stories. Yeah, the Tea Party is the first of the kind of like sub-series of stories within Mayhem Cerebrum, I guess, if you want to word that way. We're gonna repeatedly come back to these stupid little idiots and the City of Discord because I like them, and I think everybody else does too. And it'll be a good excuse to do some just fun little romps. I didn't get a lot of opportunity to do just fun little romps in either Evie Valley or Das Vidania, so we're going to do some of that. Today we definitely have a very fun little romp. So, without further ado, here is Whore and Wolf, Part 1. Most people weren't very fond of Laughing Jack. He was off-putting, creepy, greasy. Also, he killed people and ate their hearts for fun, though that wasn't as much of a deal-breaker in Discord as one might think. His presence was, at the very least, tolerated because of one particularly important thing. He was a damned good hangman. The job itself wasn't that hard, of course. It was mostly a matter of dragging the poor bastard of the day up to the gallows, stringing him up, and pulling the lever. What really made a good hangman was the showmanship. It was the one time where everyone else in the room was just as bloodthirsty as he was. This particular hanging, one of the first since he'd been rehired, as it were, was a doozy. He was still getting back into the swing of things, but it was returning to him pretty quickly.
Now there ain't a lot of rules in Discord, and I think that's how we all like it,
he shouted to the crowd. Jack always enjoyed the jumbled up emotions on the audience's faces. They tended to range anywhere from extremely uncomfortable to uncomfortable amounts of ecstasy.
But there are some things that are just reprehensible, rules or not, so remind me again, mate.
He put a hand on the shoulder of the demon standing trembling next to him on the platform.
How many little girls was it you diddled again, eh?
Despite being nearly a full head taller than him, the demon refused to look in his direction, let alone respond. Even if he'd wanted to, he wouldn't have been heard over the hissing and booing of the crowd.
It might seem a bit arbitrary, sure, but more than anything, come on, mate. That's just pathetic. I mean, what kind of lowlife would go for a child when you can just put a bow on any old whore?
That got a laugh.
She'll scream just like one too if you try hard enough.
That didn't. Not that Jack really cared. He just slapped the demon on the back hard and kept grinning.
Fucking idiot. So, should we cut him up first, or just put the poor bastard out of his misery?
He asked the crowd. He cocked his head this way and that, trying to discern the difference between the sadists and the righteous. Jack couldn't always hear the best out of his right side, considering that his ear was gone, but he tried. Disappointingly, both sides seemed to be in agreement today.
Aren't you all just a bunch of bleeding hearts? Gonna give him the easy way out?
Jack took out his switchblade anyway and held it up to the demon's throat. He whimpered. After a minute, however, he put it away.
Shame. He sighed. I was looking forward to cutting off his fingers since he can't seem to keep them to himself. Ah, well.
Jack rolled up the sleeves of his once white shirt, though now it was more yellow than anything, and shackled the demon's hands. No, please, I'll do anything, he begged.
Ah, cold iron's got you talking, eh?
Jack laughed.
What's the point of a hanging if the sob don't stay dead? Now up you get.
The demon tried to resist being manhandled to the gallows, and Jack growled.
No point making a fuss, mate. Either I hang you, all nice and clean like, or I slit your fucking throat. And I'll make sure it takes you bloody ages to kick it.
Fuck, the demon muttered, and it wasn't until Jack's knife cut the seam on the back of his coat that he stumbled over and up onto the gallows. He stood there on the wooden platform, trembling amidst the ruckus of the crowd.
Anyone brought any tomatoes?
Jack asked, and in response several things were thrown at the offending demon. He laughed along with them until someone tried to toss in a match.
Hoi! Hoi!
Jack shouted over the cacophony.
Nothing flammable, you cunts! Goddamn gallows made of wood!
He allowed the noise and tension to rise for another minute before he held up a hand. Jack didn't have quite the raw chutzpah that Bake had, so it took a few seconds for them to quiet down.
All right, lads.
Jack pointed behind him to where the demon was now openly sobbing.
This is what we call a pathetic sack of shit. And what do we here in Discord do with pathetic sacks of shit?
Kill him!
Sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing. What was that?
Kill him!
Like this?
Jack hovered his hand over the big lever. His lever. He was still pissed that conniving whore had touched it. The crowd cheered, and Jack led them in a lengthy chant of, "Kill! Kill!" just to draw it out more. Then, when he was satisfied, he cackled for a solid minute and pulled the lever. From the side of the stage, right between two buildings, Kay watched the demon dangle with a grimace. She'd shown up as late as she could, but Jack proved to be more of a ham than she'd anticipated. Truth be told, she wouldn't have been here at all if she could have managed it, but orders were orders. At least for the time being. She didn't like the gallows. They brought back unpleasant memories. It seemed like Jack didn't want her here just as much as she did, for as he hopped off the stage, pulling his coat back on, and saw her, he scowled. "Bravo," Kay offered, not entirely trying to keep the sarcasm out of her voice. "Truly a riveting performance."
What are you doing here, whore?
He growled. She rolled her eyes. "Nothing I want to be. Boss's orders."
What do you mean?
"Bake told me to come meet up with you. Apparently, he's got a job for us."
The both of us? What the fuck's he smoking?
"Probably a bit of everything, if we're honest." She sighed, and Jack chuckled despite himself. "I actually asked him that very question, and his response was, quote, 'How are we supposed to be a happy little family if you two keep trying to tear each other's throats out?' End quote."
It was only the one time,
Jack muttered.
And is he seriously going to make us do a bonding adventure?
"Well, he said it was either that or we have to fuck, and personally, I'd rather tear my own throat out."
I'd do worse.
"It's not a contest, Jack."
So what's this job, then?
Jack asked, leaning against a wall and running a hand under his nose, sniffing dismissively. Once again, Kay couldn't help rolling her eyes. "It's honestly only an excuse to get us to work together. He said he wants to know where Malachi is so he can keep an eye on him if he decides to try anything."
I would think there'd be higher priority tasks to do.
"For once we agree on something." Kay grimaced. "Most of his toadies have long scattered by now, but I managed to track down just one who's still in town." Jack pushed off the wall, grinning.
Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's go skin him.
"We're not going to do that," Kay said, and Jack opened his mouth to respond, but she talked right over him. "If he's able to open a doorway before we catch him, he could be anywhere in the cosmos and we'd never be able to find him. No, if we're really going to do this, then we're going to do it my way." Jack was not pleased. Kay's way, in Jack's opinion, was the most boring option possible. No torture, no killing, just a lot of talking.
So why is this bloke even still in town at all?
Jack asked, as he followed Kay down into the heart of the distillery district.
One would think he'd be lynched by now.
He probably would have, if not for his mistress. Paul Allen's been sweet on this girl at Club Sela.
Club Sela?
Jack's eyebrow raised an inch.
That industrial joint down on Lavender? Didn't know they had whores.
She's not a whore, she's a call girl.
Sorry, a classy whore.
And I think she has a special arrangement with the club. They let her use one of the private rooms to entertain her clients. Also, she has a name, you know.
You never offered.
It's Janie. And you're going to be nice to her. She's helping our good friend Paul lay low until it all blows over. We're going to convince her to tell us where he is. So you will not swear at her, or make any lewd comments, or call her a whore.
Then what the fuck am I supposed to say?
Nothing, if it's that hard for you to think. Jack frowned, but made up his mind then, just as the beat of Club Sela's electronic music began to pump through his chest. He was simply going to do whatever he wanted. Kay wasn't in charge of this little mission, even if she seemed to think so, and the only reason he was here at all was because he had nothing better to do. The driving beat only got louder as Kay and Jack passed the bouncer without incident. In fact, he practically bent over backwards to let them inside. The room beyond was dark, lit mostly with strobe lights and lasers, with most of the excitement occurring in the middle, where they'd cordoned off a dance floor come mosh pit. Along the sides were 2 layers of steel mesh walkways, and it was to the left side that Kay was walking. Yet even as she started making her way upstairs, Jack paused, sniffed the air. Something didn't smell right to him, at least behind the nigh overwhelming scent of booze and body odor. "You coming, or what?" Kay shouted at him over the music. Jack waved her off.
Like you said, I've got nothing to say.
She rolled her eyes, but turned anyway. What a nuisance. Of course, Kay figured that she'd be doing a vast majority of the work for this assignment, because from what she knew, Jack was worthless at anything that didn't involve general psychopathy and other acts of mayhem. Whatever. She was just going to get this over with and report back. The horned bastard wasn't going to get what he actually wanted, but as far as Kay was concerned, that had never been in the cards in the first place. Various pipes and girders stretched over her head as she made her way to the 3rd floor. From up here, she could see the whole dance floor. It all just looked like a bunch of noise and confusion, mostly. Probably would have made more sense if she was drunk. The DJ was... what was the word? Fire? Yeah, that was it. Her boots clunked against the steel grate as Kay wormed her way down the balcony. She'd almost worn stilettos, mostly because they would have made her at eye level with Jack, but she was glad she decided against it. The heels would have slipped right through. The private room she was looking for was at the very end of the balcony. At least Kay hoped her intel was correct. She knocked on the door briskly, and within a second, a feminine voice told her that the door was open. After turning the knob, Kay had to push aside a bright red curtain. It was probably due to the visual shielding that she got in at all. "You're running a little late, Seb." The woman on the settee's voice fell off as Kay stepped in. "Sorry," she said. "Not Seb." "You're—" Kay didn't miss the tremble in her voice. She was nervous. Then again, she was harboring a fugitive, and the interested party had just walked through the door. Anyone would be. "I'm Kay." She smiled pleasantly. "I'm here to ask you a couple of questions about someone I think you know." "Aw, hell no." The woman, Janie, shook her head vigorously. "You're that Tea Party skank." Kay elected to ignore that comment. "I'm calling the bouncers." "Hold on." Kay blocked the door as she almost stood up. "Think about this. If he wanted violence, Bakke would have sent Jack or just come himself. But he sent me. All I want to do is talk." Janie pursed her rouge-red lips as she thought. "Sure," she agreed after a moment. "Let's talk." After grabbing one of the throw pillows from the settee to squeeze, Janie gestured Kay to the identical couch across from her. Flopping down, Kay sized her up briefly, forming a plan of attack. Before she spoke, "I'm sure you're aware that we know you're hiding Paul Allen. That's why you're here, right?" Janie's bare shoulders tensed as she glared at Kay. "To take him up to those gallows of yours and make an example out of him." She looked confused when Kay started laughing. I think you're under a bit of a misconception about how important your friend Paul is, so let me try to explain the food chain. Paul Allen was a pawn under Malachi. Let me finish. She held up a hand once Janie made to interject. "And I am now, unfortunately, a pawn under Bakke. I was able to single-handedly best Malachi, so you can see why Bakke isn't really concerned. And if he's so unimportant, why bother us at all? He has some information we would like to have. That's all. If he agrees to spill, you two are free to go on with your lives. No more interference from us." Janie seemed to consider this. Of course, it would be tempting, after all the stress of keeping him hidden. "For real?" she asked, wavering. "For real?" Kay nodded. Sighing, Janie shook her head. "All right," she muttered, "but you have to promise you won't hurt him." "If he doesn't try to hurt me. He's at my place over by Arkin Row."
"Liar."
An all too familiar voice interrupted. Kay almost groaned. The dickhead had to have picked this moment to ruin her perfect... Oh, shit.
"Look who I found trying to sneak out the back."
Jack pulled aside the curtain to reveal that he was gripping a rather unfortunate suited man by the hair.
"Seems like the whore had it laid right before you."
Without hesitation, Janie grabbed the glass ashtray that was on the table in between them and smashed it over Jack's head. "Run, Paul!" It didn't do much, but it surprised him enough that Jack loosened his grip and Paul Allen was able to squirm away and back through the door. Kay and Jack stared at each other for just a moment, Kay processing the twist and Jack processing his new concussion, before they both took off running after him.
"You're welcome, by the way."
Jack grinned as they barreled down the stairs. She spared one quick second to shoot him a glare and scowled. "Fuck you." They only had a few seconds before Paul Allen made it through the mosh pit and out of the club, but both of them knew that they weren't going to quite catch him in time. There must be a back way out of that room. Kay clicked her tongue in annoyance. Bitch must have been trying to stall me long enough for him to get out of there.
"You didn't even tell her I was there, did you?"
Jack chuckled, knowing full well that Kay's plan had been to cut him out of the picture entirely.
"Ah, well, don't matter now. I'll catch him, and when I do, we're doing things my way. So just be a good little whore and watch me work."
Gross, and in your dreams. Fortunately for them, Paul Allen was a bit of an idiot. If he had tried to blend in with the mosh pit, they might have lost him, but instead he made a mad dash for the street where they could pick him out much easier. Jack spotted him immediately, turning a corner into an alley, and sped up, giving chase. Kay knew she'd never keep up with either of them, but she certainly wouldn't be useless. The alley they were running through curved strangely, so Kay shortcutted to the other side. Perfect. There on the corner was a woman shredding on the violin, and she had gathered quite a crowd around her. Pushing through them, Kay grabbed the violinist's shoulder. "Would you stand over there, please?" She pointed to the alley's opening. The violinist looked confused. Kay shoved a fistful of bones in her hand and repeated her request. The violinist shrugged and made it over just in time for a rather disheveled man to come barreling right into her, and the crowd that had come with. Jack's grin widened, and he pushed himself even faster as Paul got caught in the crowd. He flew over the uneven cobblestones, closing the distance. Reaching out a hand, he made one final leap, but he just missed the back of his shirt collar. Desperately, Paul managed to squirm through the crowd, and Jack swore under his breath. Luckily, he didn't fall too far behind, as just then someone in the crowd realized who he was, and they very quickly dispersed. Kay was now pretty far ahead of them, and she used the few precious seconds allotted her to try to predict where Paul would run. If she was him, she'd try to run in a straight line, because at a full sprint, Paul was taller and would probably be able to outrun Jack, at least for long enough to disappear. But she was not Paul Allen, so most likely he wouldn't do that at all. He'd make as many turns as he could to try to shake Jack, she could bet that much, because it was a dumbass move. After the previous incident, he'd probably avoid crowds as well, which left there. She hurried down the side street that looked the curviest and grinned. Discord's state of amalgamation imbued it with many odd and often useless architectural accessories. One of these happened to be a giant wrought iron gate right in the middle of the street. Of course, it was always left open, so the lever that closed it might not even work anymore. But she couldn't test it out, not when she only had seconds before Paul turned that corner, and when he did, he'd turn a different direction if he spotted an impediment. So she waited. 5 seconds. 10. She was making a real gamble here. Had she been wrong? Yet just as she was about to take off, Kay heard distant sounds of confusion and 2 sets of feet thundering down the pavement. Just as she'd anticipated, Paul Allen turned the corner, looking rather worse for wear. Her hand twitched towards the lever, but she waited until she saw Jack a few strides behind, closing off his only other exit. With a small prayer to the cosmos at large, Kay pulled the lever and waited. For a moment, there was only a whir and a groan, and Paul was gaining. She almost ran into the center of the street to use her own body as a much less effective barrier when there was a loud clunk, and the gate swung shut just as Paul Allen reached it. He wrenched at the bars desperately, but quickly gave up when they proved incredibly solid. Turning, he took a few steps back, maybe hoping that Jack hadn't caught up to him yet. Though before he really got anywhere, Kay stuck out a leg, and he tripped right over it. Jack slowed, laughing as he saw Paul Allen sprawled out on the ground, with Kay standing over him.
"There you go," he grinned. "Now that's how it's done."
"Uh-huh," Kay glared at him pointedly as she watched him pant. "You're welcome, by the way." The smile quickly fell off his face as he glanced between Paul Allen, the closed gate behind him, and Kay, with her legs still outstretched and her hand on the lever. Jack scowled.
"Fuck you."